Okay, so what we did last time, we saw Professor Halbertal take on the Meiri and trying to basically claim, or at least to analyze or to try to understand, do we can view the Meiri as just someone who basically followed the same opinions from the past, just formulating it in a better way, or that he really deviated from what was said before him, and he created a new category of gudurim bedarkei hadat, people who are defined in what we will call morality or ethics, and therefore many of our perceptions changed. So he went one by one. So if you remember that, he spoke about our let's say perception on their behavior or their moral behavior. He says that changed. Okay, so it said that changed. In terms of let's say drinking their wine or marrying them, that did not change. So if I'm not mistaken, page 5, 6. Okay, page 6. Thank you. Page 6. Under B. Yes, nachon. That's true. In considering the prohibition on commercial dealings with the Gentile on his festival day, the Meiri says, it appears to me that these matters all pertain only to worshippers of idols and their forms and images, but that nowadays these commercial activities are wholly permitted. Again, on the same subject, for it is common practice in all lands to trade with those among whom they dwell, in all commodities and all manner of commerce, even on their holiday. It seems certain that the reason is that these rules were enacted only for their, meaning i.e. Talmudic times, when the worship of idols was widespread for sacrifice and thanksgiving. As you see in the reference to their festival days, for they worshipped the heavenly host, the sun, the moon, trees, and stones. The Meiri thus distinguishes between ancient times when idolatry was prevalent and his own era, which was end of 13th century, beginning of 14th century. When doing so, he nevertheless makes no mention of the distinction between nations restricted by religious practices and nations not so restricted. In that same context, he tries to overcome the explicit Talmudic reference to Christians being amongst those whom one may not trade on their festival days. So, first and foremost, what he does here, Professor Halbertal, which is interesting, is that sometimes the Meiri would use this distinction between Gdurim bedarkei adat and not Gdurim bedarkei adat, meaning well defined in morality and ethics, or not. But in this case, when it comes to business, he does not use it. He just says what? All the prohibitions that the Mishnah basically detailed for us was only for idol worshippers. We do not have idol worshippers anymore. Now, don't think that the Meiri was not surrounded by Christians. 13th century, at the end of the 13th century, beginning of the 14th century in Perpignan, which is southern France, there are many Christians, many churches. He was definitely involved. He knew. But he also knew that there are not idol worshippers anymore. So therefore, everything that the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, does not apply on them anymore. So that has nothing to do. And now look at the depth. Why there is no need to talk about Gdurim bedarkei adat here? Because here it's not about behavior. It's not about moral and ethics. The idea of not doing business with them at their holidays comes from what? From what concern? That you will have a debate with them, and then they will need to take a shvua, an oath, and they will use their God in their oath, right? So we don't want it. B, we are concerned that they will enjoy the money and the profit, and they will bring a sacrifice to their idol. Because those two concerns do not apply now, so I don't need to go to morality and ethics. This has nothing to do with morality and ethics. It's all to do with what? With religion. And therefore, if you see, it's really clear. And when I constitute the idea that it's not the same religion anymore, basically, I say it does not apply. I just want you to understand, I mean, for someone who loves Talmud, what the Meiri does, he basically takes 6-7 pages of the Talmud and says, put it in the museum. Maybe when we will see another era of idol worshipping, we can bring it back. But this is basically what it means, which is an incredible thing to say. As for the statement in the Gemara that a Christian or Notzri is always forbidden to be traded with, I interpret it, meaning the Meiri says, as it derives from watchers, Notzrim, who come from a far country, as stated in Jeremiah, who referred to that nation as Notzrim after the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. And it is known that there was an image of the sun in Babylon, and the entire nation of Nebuchadnezzar worshipped it. And you already know that the sun serves as the first day, Sunday, in the enumeration of the beginners of days, and that day accordingly was called Notzri on account of its connection to Nebuchadnezzar, because of its association with the sun's dominion, all of which is obvious and clear. The Meiri says the Notzrim that the Talmud talks about, it's not Christians. Notzrim means what? Based on the name of Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? So this is nothing to do with the Christians of today. And by the way, there is definitely some also historical proof to it. We know early Christianity and the early Christians started what time? Like early Christians, Jewish Christians. The what? End of Beit Sheni. Beit Sheni was destroyed 70. Okay? So the end of Beit Sheni, we already have Jews who are Jews for everything, but they also believe in Yeshua. Okay? We know that, by the way, from a Mishnayot. Some of the Mishnayot talks about what? If you see a Chazan that says what? Modim, Modim, you what? You silence him. Why? Because you are afraid. You are concerned that one Modim is to Hashem and one Modim is to Jesus. Okay? So already in the time of the Mishnah, when there is davening in shuls, there were shuls also when the Bet HaMikdash was built, basically already know, they understand, they realize, they are well aware that they are Christians, that they are Jews who are Christians. By the way, just as a side note, before the Roman Empire decided to adopt Christianity as their religion, they also chased Christians, and Jews also were part of it. There were tremendous massacres of Jewish Christians at that time. That's historical facts. Also, I don't know if you see it or not, but I remember in Memphis, I don't know if New York or other places you had it, there was a sticker on some cars of like an eye of a fish. It's like a fish, and do you know what it means?
I saw it here. Someone had it here, probably a Christian.
Okay, and so what does it mean? Do you know what it means?
Christian, no.
Oh, so it means, what I read was that, again, if someone reads something else, bevakasha, but what I read was that was their sign of their meetings, of their private meetings, not in order to, if I wanted to have a meeting of Christians, I will put that symbol and somehow they will gather together without their quote unquote enemies know about it.
When you said the Christians, Jews were part of it. Jews were part of it.
No, Jews
being killed.
were the first Christians.
No, but when you said,
That's what I mean. And then later on, the Prushim, okay, they basically tried to chase them out of town. And the Romans didn't like them either, okay? Then, in the beginning of the 5th century, around 429, the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as their religion that united the empire. And therefore, when the Gemara talks about Notzrim, in Rabbi Yochanan's time, which is the 3rd century, it's probably before the establishment of Christianity as we know it today. And therefore, I think the Meiri is correct by saying, even though it's a little far-fetched to say that the Notzrim means what? Nebuchadnezzar and all of that. However, Robert, I'll take you in a sec. However, there is some kind of historical background to it.
Is Notzrim the original term in the Gemara, or is that a result of the censors later centuries?
I don't know, it's in Gemarot that they didn't censorize yet, it says Yeshua Notzri. It does. But the question is, right. So the word Akum Whenever you see in the Talmud akum, you know it's what? It's censorized. Okay? Ovdei Avodah Zarah was the original thing. We can give a show about this censura, which is very interesting. By the way, most of the censura, I know what is censura, right? Censor. Okay, censorships. It's the same thing in Hebrew. Who? The Christians. They forced us to erase it, to omit it, or if not, they will burn our books. So basically, most of the people who pushed for that were Jews who converted to Christianity. Yeah. They learned, and in order to find favor in the eyes of the church, they basically told the church, oh, you know, it says in the Talmud, kach vekach. Just give you a case. This is something very interesting. You know, at the beginning, there was obviously discussions about, you know, the narrative itself, but then there was also discussion about Torah Sheba'al Peh. And you can see in the 13th century, there are many debates regarding what? Regarding the Talmud. To the extent, we all know 1240 in Paris, many manuscripts of the Talmud were burnt because Rabbeinu Yechiel from Paris, he was the head of the Beit Din and he was called to the debate, he and two other rabbis. They won the debate, but they lost the Talmud. And the Maharam Rothenburg, who was Rabbi Yechiel's student, who lived in Germany, he wrote a kina, a lamentation on it, that we say every Tisha B'Av, Sha'ali Srufa Ba'esh. So yes, that's what happened. And they realized that, you know, if they cannot, that in order to, quote unquote, to make our lives miserable, if they take away the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that basically what keeps us going, that can be something that can bring us to our demise, chas v'shalom. Okay. The Meiri's interpretive agility in his effort to distinguish between the Christians and the ancient idolatrous nations reaches its pinnacle in his interpretation of the term Nutzri in the Talmud. In his view, the Christians, Nutzrim, referred to in the Talmud are none other than the Babylonians, the nation of Nebuchadnezzar. And the first day, Sunday, refer to it in that context is not the Christian holiday, but a first day on which the Babylonians worship the sun. The step of determining that the Christians of his day were not idolatrous is taken as well in other passages dealing with the prohibitions of flow from concern about indirect contact with idolatrous ritual. For the same reason, the Meiri thus relaxes the prohibition on profitable commerce for Gentile ritual necessities. We have already explained that rules such as this were instituted in their times when those Gentiles were devout in their idolatry. But now idolatry has come to an end in most places. Okay, I guess the Meiri didn't go to India. Okay? And there is accordingly no need to be stringent with respect to them in the manner of the old innovations and general embellishments. Here too, the Meiri determines that idolatry has come to an end, and he makes no mention of the formula nations restricted by religious practices. And why? Again, because it's nothing to do with morality and ethics, it's more to do with religion. The Meiri does raise the distinction between nations restricted by the ways of religion and nations not so restricted in the context of the second category, that of juridical rights and obligations. In his view, the halachic inequality with respect to the rights of Jews and Gentiles applies only to Gentiles who are not restricted by the ways of religion. You remember that one. If my ox gored his ox, I don't need to pay. If his ox gored mine, he pays in full. Not half damages, not like tam vemuad, he pays in full. An extensive description of these nations can be found in the Meiri's comments permitting Jews to sell to Gentiles of his time items that can be used as implements of destruction and to stable animals in their inns. Now, I will need to give an introduction. The Talmud talks about the prohibition to sell arms to Gentiles. Why? Not might. They will use it to kill us. Okay, so we shouldn't. That's what the Gemara says. Also, you are not allowed to give them animals to put in their inns, INNS. Okay, why? Because you are concerned that they will take advantage of those animals. Okay, he forbids these activities only with respect to nations not restricted by the ways of religion, as he says. All of these people possesses no religion in the world and submit to the fear of no divinity, instead burning incense into the heavenly bodies and worshipping idols. Therefore, they are unconcerned about any sins. Elsewhere, he adds regarding the obligation to rescue a Gentile, here too, one must assess, as we have already discussed, what kind of Gentile is under consideration. What I mean is that of idolaters it is said that they were not restricted by the ways of religion. On the contrary, even sin and everything repulsive is fit in their eyes. As the foremost of the philosophers has already said, put to death one who has no religion. Hence, the halachic equality of rights applies only with respect to nations that are not restricted by the ways of religion, or, in parallel terms, that the Meiri uses those who possesses no religion. So, no religion or not defined by religion is the same thing. Only people who are nations who are restricted by the laws of religion, they are fine. The only problem with the Meiri in terms of practice, if you see a Gentile in a pit and he needs your help, you're going to ask him what? About theology? Or you just give him a rope, you bring him up, and you ask him, and then if he answers correctly, you say yes. If not, you cut the cord. Like, I don't know. It's a bit of a problem in practice. Practicality is a little difficult, but he's talking about obviously about its theory. Okay, a general formulation of the principle is found in the Meiri's comments on the obligation to return a Gentile's lost property and the prohibition of robbery. Thus, all people who are of the nations that are restricted by the ways of religion and worship the divinity in any way, even if their faith is far from ours, are excluded from this principle of inequality. Rather, they are like full-fledged Jews with respect to these matters, even with respect to lost property and returning assets gained through error and all other matters, with no distinction whatsoever. In his view, the halachic dividing line is not between Jews and Gentiles in an ontological sense, but between nations possessed of law and lawless nations, i.e., between barbarism and civilization. Now, this is an incredible, if it's true, this is an incredible distinction. It's not anymore about what do you believe in, but rather how does it influence your life. We understand that people, and you see it now in America, for sure, you definitely see it in Europe. People need religion. I'm not saying that it's opium for the masses, okay? I'm not that. But I think people need religion because it gives some kind of guidance, guidelines, structure, expectations, something. You don't just wake up in the morning. I really believe that some of the phenomena that we see today, social phenomena, are because of lack of religion. People are looking for meaning, okay? It's not only Frankel who understood it, okay? We all understand it. People wake up in the morning, they need a mission, they need something to believe in, they need something to fight for. I will tell you, even among Jews, I was a child, but I read about it a lot when I grew up. You probably most all of you probably participated in it. Demonstrations in order to release Jewry, the Soviet Jewry, okay? That's something that united the Jewish people, the Jewish communities. People were arrested for it. People did it every day. People woke up in the morning with a cause. They're going to save a Jew from Russia, okay? So it basically brought people together, and even non-religious went there. A lot of non-religious people went there. Why? Because there was a cause. It is a Jewish cause. No one checked if the prisoner is a religious guy or a not religious guy. Or we wanted the Jews of Russia to get out of there. And after that fight was over, and Baruch Hashem, we won. When was the last time, until probably only a few months ago, that Jews came together for a Jewish cause? I think there is something there that you need to have something to, all those values of tikkun olam and all of that, that's wonderful. Thinking that others will join you when you need them. But then when you wake up in the morning and no one of the women organization cares about the women who were kidnapped, and none of the children organization cares about the babies that is still in Gaza, and no one cares about the fact that we were attacked, then you can be the most liberal, most believing, trusting fellow. But if you ask yourself at the night, Rega, what am I doing? What is really my cause? So I was not that surprised that in the rally that they had, I don't know, 6 months ago, 5 months, whatever, in Washington, there were a lot of people, religious and non-religious, because people are looking for a cause.
They had another demonstration with very few in America recently.
I have an explanation. Exactly. There is a major problem, in my opinion. There is a major problem among, especially the youngsters, if they are not that committed, that they need to be committed to something. People are looking really, truly for a cause and a meaning, and therefore, what basically we see is that religion or structure gives you also morality and ethics. So again, we know people butchered in the name of God. Okay, we saw it last year. We saw in the Crusades in the Middle Ages. We saw all the major wars probably in history were because of religion. Okay, so it's not necessarily that you can be a devout Christian, Jew, or Muslim and you are a peaceful guy. But I'm saying in a normal case, religion gives some kind of what? Of structure and moral compass. Because if we accept the 10 Commandments, which is accepted by all, hopefully, maybe different interpretations, but it's basically what? Basic moral code. Sheva mitzvot bnei Noach, we spoke about it, code of ethics and morality, and believing in God. So if you have it, that's what the Meiri basically says, which is a tremendous change. It means what? If I want to be now very liberal, I would say, I don't care who you believe in. I care about who you are. What does that faith makes you? Yes.
A lot of Jews have adopted liberalism as a religion. That became their religion.
Right.
That's part of what we say. People are, without passing judgment, people are looking for some kind of a cause that it's greater than them. You can be the most selfish person on earth. One day you're going to wake up and say, I need something greater than that. I need something greater than just, having everything I want, buying everything that I wish, and having no limits to whatever funds I have. At the end, it's boring. You want to do something else. And therefore, that's where the Meiri comes in, which is a revolution in terms of halacha. Yes?
Would you agree that in the Shoah, from the Germans' point of view, there wasn't a religious aspect?
There was a religious
There
aspect?
was not a religious
Was not a religious aspect?
But there was a nationalistic. It was a
greatest example of butchery.
So I'm not an expert on the Shoah and reasons and things like that. I mean, reasons, not reasons to explain God, just reasons of how it came. They also have some kind of their racism and anti-Semitism, whatever, that was there in a way, that was their religion to the end, meaning there are historical documents that Hitler knew he is failing, he's being defeated, and he still will take soldiers and energy to kill more Jews rather than to try to defend the lines. I mean, the craziness was such that he was obsessed with it. So, yeah, but I don't know exactly with the religion. I think that at the beginning, he didn't like the church either. Yeah, the what?
He had a cause, but it wasn't religious based.
All right, sure.
It was basically survivalist.
Right. Even though that some of his anti-Semitic remarks and comments and all of that, he derived it from the church. For sure. Okay. Especially important is the Meiri's comparable treatment of Jew and Gentile with respect to the obligation to return lost property, the obligation to help load beasts of burden, the prohibition on excessive profit, equal compensation for property damage, and equality of punishment for bloodshed. In all these instances, the existing discrimination has been justified by reference to limiting family-related scriptural terminology, your peer, re'acha, your brother, achicha, and your fellow, amitcha. An explicit statement of this point may be found in the Meiri's comments on the prohibition of excessive profit. Anyone disciplined by religious practices is within the protection of the ban on excessive profit, but adulterers are not within the scope of brotherhood and for purposes of being included within the law against excessive profit in a commercial transaction. The rabbis established the principle do not wrong one another, the scriptural basis for the prohibition on excessive profit to mean you shall not wrong one who is with you in Torah and commandments. According to the Meiri, those who are restricted by the ways of religion are included within the term your fellow, amitcha, which is interpreted in the Talmud as one who is with you in Torah and commandments, which means someone who is a what? Not only a Jew, shomer Torah mitzvot, which is also can cause issues within Israeli society itself. So the Meiri says definitely not with another Jew, but also with a non-Jew. The Meiri defines people possessing religion to be Israel's partners in Torah and commandments, and he brings them into the circle of brotherhood for purpose of juridical standing. By this remarkable step, the Meiri cancels the juridical distinction between Jew and Gentile and replaces it with the distinction between one possessing religion and one lacking it. The Meiri does not rest content with providing a sweeping systemic explanation for permissive ruling related to economic and functional relationships. His concept is broader, reaching out to diminish inner hostility and effect a change in consciousness itself. This expansion is articulated in a further permissive ruling, also unique to the Meiri among medieval halachic authorities, related to the extending greeting to a Gentile. The Talmud permits extending greetings to a Gentile for the sake of peaceful relationship, but it forbids expensive greetings to a Gentile in any times, as well as entering his house to greet him on his festival day, even if the greeting is not expensive. If a Jew happens to encounter a Gentile on his festival day, he should greet him half-heartedly and gravely. It's like Tisha B'Av, right? Rashi notes that expensive greeting to a Gentile is forbidden because Shalom is the name of God and should not be associated with the Gentile. The prohibition on entering Gentile's house to greet him is explained by the argument that the Gentile might thank his gods for having been honored by the greeting. But the Meiri offers different explanation for the prohibitions on expensive greeting and on greeting on the Gentile's festival day. In his view, the limitation on greeting is tied to a dangerous implications of social contact with pagans. So he says the following: we do not refrain from greeting idolaters, but it is not proper to greet them as greater length than usual in customary, which is what I term expensive greetings. For one who extends greeting as a greater length, at greater length than the norm shows greater affection and involvement. And you already know that idolatry was appealing to many. Accordingly, some of our great sages would initiate greetings to an idolater, for the one who initiates the greeting provides a basis for the other to respond in kind, and by inviting greetings that is merely in accordance with the norm, one can invite a similar response and avoid excessive involvement. But if one were to await the other's initial greeting, the latter might come forward with an affectionate and effusive greeting that would have to be reciprocated, leading to the two to become unduly friendly and close, and forming a model that others might emulate. But expensive greeting in accordance with the norm is not suspect, even though it is expensive. And this relates to what I have already written concerning the rabbi's ban on entering a Gentile's home on his festival day to greet him. For he may recount the nature of the festival being celebrated for the sake of some particular heavenly body or sacred figure, and the Jew through all the chattering about it may be ensnared. But if he encounters the Gentile in the marketplace, he may greet him even on his festival day, albeit not in a manner that express affection or attachment, lest the Gentile, having both the opportunity and the eagerness to recount the might of his idol, continue on to do so. But in many events, none of this applies to nations restricted by the ways of religion and believing in the existence, unity, and power of God, even if they go astray with respect to some matters according to our beliefs. This is interesting. So now, what? The Meiri did not know that about missionaries. He didn't know that. So I guess it was different. It was different because Jews will not just go ahead and convert to Christianity unless they were forced. Not always, but mostly. And Christians are not probably going to convert to Judaism too much. And therefore he says, okay, so you greet them. You don't have the same concern that you had when the other nations of idols, basically they were so enthused about their idols, and they will basically talk your ear off until you will do what they did. The Meiri determines that the prohibitions on greeting a Gentile expensively and entering his home to greet him on his festival day do not apply to the Christians of his day, but only to the ancient idolatrous nations. This novel permissive ruling is all the more interesting because the Meiri's, contrary to Rashi's view, relates the origin and nature of the prohibition to the limitations on affectionate or intimate relationship with Gentiles that might bring about risky influences. The Meiri's understood the term expensive greeting, kfilat shalom, not in its direct literal sense of repeatedly stating a greeting, but as an affable expression of affection and attachment. In his view, it would be permissible to extend expensive greeting in the merely literal sense even to ancient idolaters. But this understanding of the prohibition makes the meaning of his permissive ruling with respect to Christians all the more powerful. By permitting a Jew to greet a Christian expensively and enter a Christian's home on his festival day to greet him, the Me'iris allows for a range of affectionate social contact that go far beyond the expedient relationship that other halachic authorities wanted to make possible. The types of activity permitted by the Me'iris make away from Jewish-Christian relationships in this area the cold sense of estrangement that the halacha sought to create by setting fixed forms for greeting a Gentile. This is something very interesting. He basically says there will not be affection or love, which in a way is a bit of a problem because we know that one of the reasons for the prohibitions of yainam, wine, and bread and all of that was to limit social relationship. So we understand that according to the Meiri, on one hand, the permission is incredible, at the same time, the outcome is dangerous. The Meiri's consistency in implementing the distinction between the restricted and unrestricted nations, and his use of that distinction in a manner going far beyond addressing the community's pressing economic needs, appear pointedly in his treatment of the halacha pertaining to the personal status of Gentiles. The halacha determines that Gentile brothers from a common father who convert to Judaism are not bound by the law of Yibum, inasmuch as there is no paternity for a Gentile. The attachment requiring Yibum requires fraternity on the father's side, and even if the mother of twin brothers converted to Judaism while pregnant, the brothers are not bound by Yibum. They are not considered brothers requirement. The Talmud offers the following rationale for that halacha. We learn from this that the merciful one made Gentiles' progeny legally fatherless, as it's written, whose flesh is the flesh of... Okay, I will just move on. And whose issue is like the issue of horses. Okay, the progeny of a Gentile is ownerless and is like and the tie between father and offspring is biological only. This understanding has important halachic ramifications related to a family law, for it negates the paternal status of a Gentile by regarding him as lacking the family ties. The Meiri's comments as follows on this passage in the Talmud: the law is that anyone who is an idolater and not within the realm of religion is like a beast, as to which we are unconcerned about paternity. This comment means that the law negating paternity with respect to Gentiles does not apply to the restricted nations of his time, but only to the idolatrous nations. The link between the natural and the barbaric that defines the Gentiles as a beast applies only to ancient nations lacking law. This is again yet another mahapecha, revolution, mamash, because you would think that if we're talking about quote unquote DNA, so the DNA is the same DNA. There's nothing to do if you believe in the sun, moon, or the tree, or you believe in Jesus. Should be the same thing. Answer is no. Being restricted by the laws of religion also cement the ties between parents and children even after someone converted. This is revolutionary, mamash. The Me'iris is the only medieval halachic authority to distinguish between contemporary and ancient nations in this regard. It's the only one. For his attitude toward the question is one of principle and is not caught up in the practical needs of that flow from economic and political dependence on Gentiles. The question of whether the Hebrew requirements apply to the twin sons of a Christian mother who converted to Judaism while pregnant has nothing to do with the pressing matters of Jewish-Gentile relations. Nevertheless, the Meiri determines that these brothers are subject to Hebrew requirements. From his perspective, if a Gentile possessed a religion, there is no justification for relating to him as to an animal, which is interesting. Basically, what's the case? The case is she was pregnant with the twins. She gave birth to them. So basically, they are not brothers. No, she converted while she was pregnant, but they are not considered brothers. One of them got married, no children, died, and the other one is not obligated in Hebrew according to the Talmud. The Meiri says what? No, he is. He is. He's obligated to do Hebrew. Why? They are brothers. How come they are all brothers? Because if she was restricted by what? By the laws of the nations, there is family ties. And why? And this is something that, look, we don't know exactly the laws of pagans and all of that. But just from what you read, they acted what we will call with no morals or ethics whatsoever. I mean, look, our sages says it about Dor HaMabul. Ki ishchit kol basar et darko al haaretz, that everyone basically what? What is ishchit? Destroyed their path on the earth. So Chazal says, everyone slept with someone else's wife, with animals. The animals themselves slept with other animals. It was chaos. Comes the Meiri and says, after people are restricted with their laws of religion, it might not be mamash Judaism, but there is more structure. Meiri, end of the 13th century. The second innovation relates to the link between his permitting contacts with contemporary Gentiles on the ground that they are not idolatrous and the substantive change in how their juridical status is conceived. This link rests on the determination that idolatrous nations are nations lacking fear of the divinity and therefore that they do not recognize the concept of sin or transgression. Thus, there is a two-way causal connection between a nation's adultery and its lack of restrictions by the ways of religion. The third innovation is the Meiri's concept that the Talmud's inequality between Jew and Gentile with respect to personal and property rights arises from the parallel distinction between restricted nations and those unrestricted, not from any ontological distinction between Jew and a Gentile or even between idolaters and worshippers of the divine. By establishing the inequality on this new basis, the Meiri limits its application to the ancient idolatrous nations and also provides an inner rationale. The inequality reflects a sort of measure for measure attitude towards the undisciplined nations. There is no obligation to treat lawless nations in accordance with legal constraints. The Meiri applies this distinction between restricted and unrestricted nations to matters going beyond the constraints that vexed his predecessors, such as danger of life on the Shabbat, or as well as the preparation for food for a Gentile, and the daring reading of Ein Mazal Israel, as a statement granting direct divine concern for all those possessed religion. To examine, yes, we are going to finish it up today. To examine the philosophical and theological origins of the Meiri determination that idolatry no longer exists and his assumptions regarding the concept of restricted by the ways of religion, it is necessary to study his use of the terms possessed of religion, ways of religion, or religious ways in context independent of the halachic standing of Gentiles. These terms appear numerous times in such contexts throughout the Meiri writings, and those passages help illuminate his intention in coining the terms nations restricted by the ways of religion and nations possessed of religion, and enable us to understand the broader context of his position. The domain of religion forms the basic layer of beliefs on which the existence of disciplined community is founded. This domain is the common province, not of those possessed of wisdom, but of religious beliefs as a whole. We have faith in creating, overseeing, and recompensing God. The Meiri religious tolerance grows out of his recognition of a religious domain held in common by Jews, Christians, and Muslims, and from the fact that the value of the common domain is rooted in its necessary contribution to the creation of sound societies. The Meiri occasionally portrays this realm in radical terminology, referring to the brotherhood of those possessing religion or to the applicability to all such people of the name Israel. His conception of the common base of all religions is reflected most astonishingly in relation to an apostate, mumar, who moves from one religion to another. As Jacob Katz has pointed out, according to the Meiri, an mumar is not one who has changed his religion, but one who lacks any religion. A Jew who converts from Judaism to Christianity is not subject to the rule of one who is pushed down into a pit to die, but is not taken out. By virtue of being Christian, he remains within the core that is common to Judaism and Christianity. Both are possessed of religion. The apostate who must be put to death is one who has thrown off the yoke of religion in general. Of all religion, thank you, in general. The Meiri is the first thinker to suggest concept of interreligious tolerance built on the functional value common to all religion. His tolerance thus extends to the other religions, but not to people lacking any religion whatsoever. This is really an amazing thing. Basically, the Meiri lives in a Christian world, in a Christian society. He believes that what? Yes, obviously I'm going to sit Shiva on you when you convert to Christianity, but you are not totally out. By the way, later on, in the 16th century, 100 years after the expulsion from Spain, communities had to deal with Jews who converted to Christianity, and now they what? They want to come back. There are many, many interesting questions. Inyanei ishut, marriage issues, and then also just they didn't know. You have a child who was born to what? To someone who already converted to Christianity, or is the grandchild. 100 years went by, he has no clue, but he knows he's a Jew. So what do you do with them? How do you bring them back? Do you bring them back? And some of the Meiri's, not the Meiri's principles, but some of the ideas depends on how much do you want them back. Okay, so that was a very interesting thing, especially in the 16th century. Now, just to finish up with something very optimistic, mamash. The Rambam in Hilchot Melachim, Perek Yud Aleph. כל הדברים האלו של ישוע הנוצרי ושל זה הישמעאלי שעמד אחריו. It says everything that took place in the history since Jesus and Muhammad. אינו אלא ליישר דרך למלך המשיח. They all paved the path for מלך המשיח. ולתקן את העולם כולו, לעבוד את השם יחד. And to basically to unite all the world to what? To worship only Hashem. Together. שנאמר, כי אז אהפוך אל עמים שפה ברורה, because then I will transform the nations to speak one language, a clear language, לקרוא כולם בשם השם, that all of them will what? Will cry out to Hashem, ולעובדו שכם אחד, and to worship him as one together. כיצד? כבר נתמלא העולם כולו מדברי המשיח ומדברי התורה ומדברי המצוות, ופשטו הדברים אלו באיים רחוקים ובעמים רבים ערלי לב, והם נושאים ונותנים בדברים אלה ובמצוות התורה. אלו אומרים מצוות אלו אמת היו וכבר בטלו בזמן הזה ולא היו נוהגות לדורות, ואלו אומרים דברים נסתרות יש בהם ואינן כפשוטם, וכבר בא משיח וגילה נסתריהם. כשיעמוד המלך המשיח באמת ויצליח וירום וינשא מיד, הם כולם חוזרים ויודעים ששקר נחלו אבותיהם, שנביאיהם ואבותיהם יטעו. What does it mean? It means, you have the English at the back if you want, but leave it alone. Basically, the Rambam says the following, and it is a very interesting concept on other religions. You know, many people see Christianity and Islam as, you know, competitors and, you know, things that we need to deal with or whatever. The Rambam looks at the two other religions in a very different way. He says, look, what's the outcome of Christianity and Islam? Most people, most humanity believes in what? In one God. The basically values of, you know, chesed. I'm talking about normative people. Kindness, compassion, justice, tzedakah, charity, being good people, being moral people, ethical people, and that can be subjective, but to try to make this world a better place, this is probably the common denominator between most people. Most. let's put it maybe most normal people. And also, Christianity and Islam helped to spread the Bible. Yes, Christians accept the Old Testament, they just added the new one. Now, it's true, Islam claims that we faked the Tanakh and Quran is the true Tanakh.
Except it came so much later.
Who cares? So the thing is, it's not only now it's nice to have established, in 1923. Okay, back then who cares, right? 7th century, Muhammad says that we faked it, and he has the original one. He has the right one. But at the end of the day, most people who have anything to do with religion, they know about what? Abraham, Moshe, Yitzchak, Yaakov, right? Some of them know more about Jesus, some of them know more about Muhammad, but they all know those names. So basically, he says, let's be thankful to the fact that what? That since Abraham, where all the world was pagan and he was the only monotheist, or one of the only monotheists, today the world is definitely more monotheist than pagan. Okay. Now, when Mashiach comes, they will realize that they had some mistakes. But that's okay. He will fix it. He will fix it, and they will just what? Correct their thoughts. Not that they're going to convert to Judaism. Don't forget, the Rambam messianic vision is what? That we all going to worship Hashem as one God, but each one of us will do it with our own way. We will just know that the Torah is correct, and the Jewish interpretation for the Torah was the correct one, and therefore we will do our thing and they will do their thing. But it's not that they need to totally transform their lives. They just need to what? To change their thoughts, their theology regarding Jesus or Muhammad, but to understand that there is only one God and this is Hashem. I will tell you another thing, that there was definitely some kind of an evolvement from Christianity to Islam, is that if in Christianity, especially in the beginning, you have the Trinity, in Islam there was never Trinity. The only thing that Muhammad insisted, and it came about only when he confronted the Jewish tribes in the area, was when he would when he put the sword on someone and says to him, the only way for you to save is to believe that there is only, I think it's called Allah ilah illallah, which means there is no other God besides a God. So that's what he said to everyone. But when he came to the Jews, he realized they definitely can say it. They believe in it. So therefore he added, and Muhammad is his prophet, which he knew that will cause troubles to the Jews. Okay? So basically, what he says that basically you have what? We also believe that there's only one God. We have only one issue, that Muhammad is not his true prophet. We think that Moshe Rabbeinu is his true prophet. By the way, and just I'll take a minute. When you learn a little bit about Islam, you can definitely identify with it much more than Christianity in terms of being a Jew, because there are 5 fundamentals for Islam: Tefillah, Tzom, Tzedakah, Tzom, fast, so prayer, fasting, Tzedakah, believing in one God, believing in Muhammad as a prophet, so that's a problem, and there is one more, I forgot. I think there was one more. Oh, and the Hajj, right, to go to Mecca, to go to Shalosh Regalim. Yeah, okay, so basically centralization of religion, that's basically what it is. And that's the Sunnis. The Shiites have one more mitzvah, which is to believe that Ali, if I'm not mistaken, is the true heir. There was a big machlokes there. Okay, so I think to believe that Ali and whatever her name was, I forgot, Fatima maybe, Yamim, whatever her name was, that she is the true mother of the prophet, whatever. So basically, it's an inner debate between them. But when you think about those 5 fundamentals of Islam, pretty nice.
Didn't they also take the Akeda and sort of switch it around?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. First, Ishmael was the one who was, and not Yitzchak. Okay, everyone. I think Napoleon said, you can take whatever. Religion is always good. Rega, for the philosophers, I think he said something along the lines. I'm not sure. I don't quote him correctly. I think for the philosophers is to show how people can be so stupid. For the theologians is to show that God exists or something like that. And for the conquerors to use it in order to conquer more or something like along those lines, which means religion can always be useful, okay, in order to accomplish something. So that's for today. Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll start a new subject.